Mr. President.
Senator from Montana.
Mr. President, millions of acres of national forests in Montana and across the West are at extreme risk of catastrophic wildfire, and just throwing a whole bunch of money at the problem is not going to solve it. And one of the biggest barriers to responsible forest management is the Ninth Circuit's Cottonwood decision that dates all the way back to 2015. In a nutshell, the Cottonwood decision imposed additional red tape on federal agencies and is having a crippling effect, crippling consequences on common sense land management. And that's not just what I or leaders of the wood products industry believe. It's exactly what the Obama administration feared when they fought against the Cottonwood decision in 2016, hoping the United States Supreme Court would overturn it. Well, they didn't overturn it. In fact, they said Congress needs to resolve this discrepancy between the Ninth Circuit and the Tenth Circuit Court. So for 6 years, we've been working to reverse this disastrous Ninth Circuit Cottonwood ruling so we'd have commonality and continuity across the entire United States versus this exception that's applied just to the Ninth Circuit states. And gratefully, for 6 years, there's been a good bipartisan effort with strong support from conservation sportsmen groups to do just that. In fact, earlier this year, I have a bipartisan bill that would fully and permanently fix this Ninth Circuit Cottonwood decision, and it cleared the Energy and Natural Resources Committee with a very strong bipartisan vote. In fact, it was all primed to get across the finish line this year in this Congress. And by the way, healthy forest management, what it does is it improves wildlife habitat because catastrophic wildfires destroy habitat. It also restores watersheds because when you have a catastrophic wildfire, in the spring when the rains come, they silt out the trout streams and affect trout habitat. They provide jobs for our timber industry that are needed badly in many parts of Montana. When I was a kid growing up in Montana, we had over 30 active sawmills. Today we're down to a handful. But somehow this bipartisan, urgently needed reform was left out. And let me paint you a picture of the effects of that Cottonwood decision. This ruling has stalled hundreds of wildfire mitigation. It's stalled wildlife and restoration projects across multiple forests, and in some cases has shut down forests in Montana and throughout the West entirely. And sadly, the conditions in our national forests have deteriorated. And too often, these catastrophic wildfires have occurred on the same acres where management was stalled due to this Cottonwood decision. And sadly, it's only going to get worse. What's more, this Ninth Circuit created a split in the courts, creating two different standards for forest management across the United States. All my bill does is it applies a common standard, the same standard, across the whole country, which that would include Montana and the other Ninth Circuit states. And the time to make this fix is now. In March of 2018, Congress passed some partial reforms to respond to the Cottonwood decision, but even these fixes expire in March of 2023. A few months ago, the Forest Service testified that the failure to act by March, as in about 3 months from now, will have devastating impacts on land management. In fact, according to the Forest Service and their testimony, if we don't pass my bipartisan bill now, at least 100 forest plans will need to go through reconsultation and red tape for no justified reason, resulting in years of delays and millions of dollars wasted. Not to mention, it'll also undermine the investments that we made here in Congress in the Great American Outdoors Act, probably the greatest conservation win we've seen in 50 years in Washington, D.C. Mr. President, the failure to pass my Cottonwood solution is bad for wildlife, it's bad for forest health, it's bad for habitat, and it's dangerous for local communities. There's no doubt the summers are getting longer, they're warmer. This is an important mitigation strategy to address the issues of warmer summers and longer summers, longer fire seasons. I can tell you I'm deeply disappointed after years of bipartisan work, and the Energy and Natural Resource Committee passed this bill 16-4 in a strong bipartisan vote. Sadly, this bill has fallen through the cracks during this very broken process here in D.C. related to budgets, and it will fail to pass when it's so desperately needed. And by the way, it doesn't cost anything. There is no need to pay for. This is a common sense bipartisan fix. It reflects the Obama administration position from 6 years ago. It's supported by mainstream conservation and sportsman groups from the left, the center, the right. And I will tell you, I'm not going to stop fighting on this to ensure that we pass this common sense forest management policies. It actually generates tax revenues because you get more timber harvest going on by improving the landscape. And we need to finally overturn this disastrous Cottonwood decision. This bill should have been and needed to have passed this year, but we're not going to give up the fight. Thank you.